The sea was black, the kind of black that swallows shape and distance until even the horizon disappears. It was just after midnight on July 20th, 1943, somewhere over the Bay of Biscay, off the coast of occupied France. The sky was clear, the moon sharp and bright, and the water below looked like polished metal. Inside a British aircraft cutting through the cold night air, the crew had been told the mission would likely fail before it even began. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below. German U-boats ruled these waters after dark. They surfaced to recharge batteries, moved silently, and struck without warning. Most night patrols returned empty. Some never returned at all. But on this night, one crew would do something their own command had quietly described as nearly impossible. The aircraft was a Vickers Wellington bomber, a machine already famous for its endurance and reliability. Its geodesic frame made it strong even when damaged. At the controls sat Wing Commander Guy Gibson, a Royal Air Force officer known for calm decisions under pressure and a stubborn refusal to accept defeat. He was only 25 years old in 1943, yet he already carried the experience of a veteran. The war had tested him in dozens of missions over Germany and occupied Europe. He had led bomber streams through flak. He had watched searchlights lock onto aircraft and tear them apart. He had seen friends vanish in fire over the continent. But this was different. This was not a bombing raid against a city. This was a hunt, slow and uncertain, against an enemy that could vanish beneath the surface in seconds. Oh, you can almost feel the tension in that cockpit as the Wellington droned over open water. The engines hummed steadily. Instruments glowed faint green. The smell of oil and metal filled the cabin. Every man on board listened to the same sound, the steady beat of the aircraft and the faint whisper of wind against metal skin. They were searching for shadows on the sea, shadows that could kill them if they got too close or if they were spotted too soon. The Bay of Biscay had become one of the most dangerous patrol zones of the war by 1943. German U-boats used it as a gateway between their bases in France and the open Atlantic. After France fell in 1940, ports like Lorient, Brest, and Saint Nazaire turned into submarine fortresses. Massive concrete pens protected the boats from bombing. Thick walls and reinforced roofs shielded them from most Allied attacks. From there, they slipped into the Atlantic to attack convoys carrying food, fuel, troops, and weapons to Britain. Every convoy lost meant fewer supplies reaching the front. Every ship sunk meant sailors struggling in freezing water. By early 1943, the Battle of the Atlantic had reached a critical stage. German submarines had inflicted heavy losses for years. Wolfpack tactics allowed them to track convoys and strike in groups. Merchant ships often sailed in fear, knowing torpedoes could come without warning. But the Allies were adapting. Radar improved. Sonar, known as ASDIC, became more reliable. Escort carriers began patrolling with convoys. Long-range aircraft like the B-24 Liberator started closing the mid-Atlantic gap. But the advantage that darkness once gave U-boats was shrinking. Still, night patrols over Biscay were considered risky and often unproductive. Earlier that evening, Gibson's crew had taken off from RAF Chivanor in Devon at approximately 22:45 hours. The airfield lights faded behind them as they climbed into the dark. The briefing had been direct and realistic. Patrol assigned sectors southwest of Brittany. Use the latest air-to-surface vessel radar. Search for surface submarines returning from patrol or heading out. Attack only if the opportunity was clear and safe enough to justify the risk. Fuel was calculated carefully. The return route was fixed. Survival depended on discipline and timing. The Wellington had been modified for anti-submarine warfare. Beneath its fuselage hung depth charges fitted with hydrostatic pistols, and these were set to detonate at specific depths, usually between 20 and 30 feet. When dropped correctly, the blast would crush the submarine hull or break internal systems. The aircraft also carried machine guns in its nose and tail turrets, but these were mainly defensive. The real weapon was precision. Inside the aircraft, every crew member had a defined role. The navigator plotted their path across the sea using charts and stopwatch calculations. The radar operator watched a small screen that displayed faint returns. The wireless operator maintained contact with base when possible. The rear gunner scanned the sky for German night fighters, particularly Junkers Ju-88 aircraft, that sometimes patrolled the area. Gibson trusted his crew, and they trusted him. That trust would matter before the night ended. The first hour passed in silence. The Wellington flew low, sometimes less than 1,500 feet above the sea, to avoid detection and improve radar performance. The moon reflected sharply off the water. White lines marked the wake of distant fishing boats. Each time the radar showed a faint echo. Tension rose, then fell when it proved to be nothing. Searching was exhausting work. It required focus without distraction. Then came the first contact. It was 1:17 a.m. when the radar operator noticed a faint signal ahead at roughly 5 miles. Not strong, not certain. Just a small echo against the dark background. Gibson adjusted course slightly. The crew reduced unnecessary chatter. Eyes shifted from instruments to the sea below. For several seconds, nothing appeared. Then the shape emerged, long, narrow, riding low in the water. A conning tower visible in the moonlight. A surfaced U-boat. The submarine was likely charging batteries after a long submerged transit. Diesel engines required fresh air, so surfacing at night was standard procedure. Many commanders believed night air patrols were less effective. That belief was about to be tested. At 1:21 a.m., Gibson began his attack run. He pushed the Wellington into a shallow descent. The aircraft dropped to under 500 feet. The sea rushed closer. German sailors on the submarine looked up, stunned by the sudden appearance of a bomber skimming the waves. Some rushed to anti-aircraft guns, but reaction time was short. Gibson held steady, ignoring instinct to climb. The bomb aimer counted distance. At precisely the right moment, depth charges released from the aircraft. They fell in a staggered pattern designed to bracket the target. Seconds later, the sea erupted. A wall of water shot upward. When it fell back, the submarine was broken. Its stern dipped sharply. Men scrambled across the deck. Within less than a minute, it slipped beneath the surface. The first kill had come fast. Too fast for celebration. Gibson climbed slightly and turned away to avoid debris and return fire. Inside the Wellington, the crew remained calm. They marked the time and location. The wireless operator transmitted a short-coded signal indicating a probable sinking. The significance of that destruction extended beyond one hull. Each U-boat represented months of training and construction. Crews were experienced. Replacement was not easy by mid-1943. The German Navy was already facing increased losses. One more submarine gone meant fewer attacks on convoys crossing from North America. Instead of returning home, Gibson resumed patrol. Fuel checks were made. They had enough to continue for some time. The crew's confidence had grown. The night air felt charged with possibility. At 2:05 a.m., the radar operator called out again. Another contact, bearing slightly east. This signal was stronger and moving. Gibson banked and headed toward it. The second submarine was travelling at higher speed, wake trailing behind it in bright moonlight. Perhaps it had received a warning transmission. Perhaps it was unaware. Either way, the element of surprise was narrower. This time, the U-boat opened fire early. Tracer rounds streaked upward. Orange flashes lit the deck. The Wellington shook slightly as rounds passed close. Gibson stayed low, being almost reckless in his determination. He knew that climbing would expose them longer. The bomb aimer called the release point. Depth charges fell again. They struck the sea beside the submarine. Explosions rolled outward, slamming into the hull. The submarine's bow lifted, then cracked. The vessel rolled slowly to port before disappearing beneath the water. Oil spread across the surface. 2 submarines destroyed within less than an hour. The risk was rising. German coastal radar stations might detect them. Night fighters could scramble from bases in France. The Bay of Biscay was not empty sky. Yet the patrol continued. By 2:48 a.m, fatigue was creeping in. The crew had been airborne for hours. The third radar return appeared farther south, faint but steady. Fuel calculations were reviewed. They could still push a little longer. The third submarine was surfaced and stationary, perhaps resting or charging batteries at low speed. It had not yet detected the aircraft. Gibson approached from behind, using the moon's angle to remain less visible. The attack was almost textbook. Depth charges landed close along the hull. The explosion split the submarine open. A brief flame flickered on deck before the bow dipped and the vessel slid beneath the surface. 3 submarines gone. Even seasoned commanders would have struggled to believe such a report without confirmation. Yet radar logs and visual sightings aligned. The crew understood they were part of something rare. The broader war context made it more meaningful. In May 1943, German Admiral Karl Dönitz had already begun reconsidering Atlantic strategy due to heavy losses. U-boat crews faced improved Allied coordination. An aircraft like Gibson's were part of that shift. Air patrols forced submarines to stay submerged longer, reducing speed and range. That weakened wolf-pack coordination. But the night was not over. At 3:26 a.m, the radar flickered again. Another contact, moving quickly. Dawn was still distant, but creeping closer. Fuel was now a real concern. Gibson made the decision in seconds. One more attack. The 4th submarine seemed alert. It manoeuvred erratically. As the Wellington closed in, anti-aircraft fire erupted almost immediately. Tracers cut past the cockpit. One burst struck the fuselage, tearing fabric and metal, but not damaging critical controls. Gibson dropped lower still, skimming barely above the waves. The bomb aimer focused through vibration and noise. Depth charges released at near point-blank range. The explosion that followed was violent. Water rose high into the moonlight. When it settled, the submarine was already sinking stern first. Within moments, it vanished. 4 submarines destroyed in a single night patrol. Silence filled the cockpit. The engine seemed louder now. Fuel gauges were watched carefully. Gibson set course for England just before 4 a.m. The horizon was beginning to pale slightly in the east. The flight home felt longer. Fatigue settled in. Every unusual vibration caused brief concern. But the Wellington held together. The geodesic frame absorbed earlier damage. The crew remained focused until the English coastline appeared. They landed at RAF Chivanor shortly after sunrise. Ground crews approached cautiously, noting damage along the fuselage from machine gun fire. Debriefing began almost immediately. Times, in bearings and attack patterns were recorded. Intelligence officers compared reports with intercepted German signals. Within days, confirmation grew stronger. German records later indicated heavy submarine losses in Biscay around that period. While exact attribution in wartime is complex, the impact of that patrol was undeniable. Commanders studied the mission closely. It reinforced the value of aggressive, low-level attacks. It validated the use of radar in night operations. It showed that submarines were vulnerable even under moonlight, which many once believed provided cover. Wing Commander Guy Gibson would later lead the famous Dambusters raid in May 1943, earning national attention. But this patrol over the Bay of Biscay reflected another side of his leadership. It was quiet, methodical, and relentless. It showed confidence without recklessness. You can almost imagine sitting in that cockpit as dawn breaks. The sea below calm again, the moon fading, the knowledge that 4 enemy vessels were gone. For merchant sailors crossing the Atlantic, that meant safer passage. For Britain, it meant supplies arriving. For the German Navy, it meant trained crews lost and strategy questioned. The war at sea rarely offered clear moments of victory. It was measured in tonnage, fuel, and survival rates. But sometimes a single night shifted the numbers in a meaningful way. In the months that followed, Allied air patrols intensified. Escort carriers expanded coverage. Radar technology improved further. Submarine losses mounted. By late 1943, the balance in the Atlantic had clearly turned in favour of the Allies. But that shift was built on missions like this one. Long hours over empty water. Patience. Risk. Decisions made at low altitude in the dark. Command had once believed the mission nearly impossible. 4 submarines in one patrol sounded unrealistic, yet under clear skies and steady moonlight on July 20th, 1943, persistence met opportunity. The ocean swallowed the wreckage by morning. Waves erased visible signs. But the strategic effect remained. One crew in one aircraft had demonstrated that no part of the Atlantic was truly safe for submarines anymore. And in the quiet hours before dawn, over the cold waters of the Bay of Biscay, the impossible had become fact, one precise attack at a time. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.